To bring in front of the show, Ambassador John Bolton, former ambassador to the United Nations, former national security advisor. Ambassador, good to see you, sir. You've been the back channel before. Is the fact that the Russians are not answering the phone as concerning as it would seem to a layman?
Well, it's very unusual. During my time in the White House as national security advisor, both between our chairman of the Joint Chiefs and his Russian counterpart and the Secretary of Defense, was frequently used. These conversations are very professional, typically. They get right to the point. They do it in clear professional language. So the fact the Russians won't take the calls, I think, is pretty telling. And I think one reason may be that they know that a lot of people on our side, but perhaps more important, a lot of people on their side would listen to what they said. And they may just be worried that if they say something that doesn't quite follow the party line, that they could get into trouble. They could reveal something. They could show some dissatisfaction. I think their conclusion is it's safer not to talk at all. I suspect there are other conversations going on, but the fact they won't take these calls at a top level, I think, shows concern on the Russians' part.
Interesting. Real quick, you say there may be other back channels. So we were to believe perhaps the CIA director or the head of operations at the CIA may be able to call their counterparts, and we wouldn't get readouts or hear about that, and there may be fewer people listening.
Yeah, look, we know that our attaché, one of our defense attachés in Moscow, recently had a meeting with basically the Russian Defense Ministry's international control officer. So I think conversations are going on. We still have an open embassy in Moscow. They have one in Washington. So if we want to have a conversation, we certainly can. We know that French President Macron continues to talk to Putin on a regular basis. Not that they're exchanging anything that's making a difference, but there are lines there. I think this is just fear on the Russian part. They don't want to be put in a potentially compromising position by talking to their American equals.
Now, well, telling, if your analysis holds, telling that they are fearful on the public side, and you've been to these NATO meetings before, I've never really heard all NATO members of the leadership, at least, of their countries, seemingly speaking from the same script, which is what we saw today. Take a listen.
NATO has never been more united than it is today. The single most important thing is for us to stay unified.
We can show the strength in the EU unity and the EU transatlantic unity.
NATO and partners around the world are united.
Is unity something to be celebrated, or is unity something to be used to get Vladimir Putin to stop, which so far it hasn't?
Well, unity is a good thing, no doubt about it. By the way, I think NATO was probably most united after we were attacked on September the 11th. But what Biden said today that was most significant, I think, would shock a lot of his counterparts in NATO. He said again, sanctions never deter. He had said that in Washington a couple of weeks ago and caused confusion. His press spokespeople tried to cover it up and explain that he didn't mean it. His Secretary of State, his national security advisor, since then have both said sanctions are intended to deter. I don't know possibly what he could mean. We failed to deter this invasion back in February, and that's what everybody thought they were doing with sanctions. It was obviously insufficient, but I think the president's kind of lost the bubble on this point.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because we have those sound bites available to play. First, the president saying what you talked about, and then a little bit of history from the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. Take a listen.
And I did not say that, in fact, the sanctions would deter him. Sanctions never deter.
They are meant to have a deterrent impact.
The president believes that sanctions are intended to deter.
The purpose of the sanctions, in the first instance, is to try to deter Russia from going to war.
Forget the gotcha flip-flop. How does the Kremlin hear that and then interpret it, and what does it mean to them?
Well, I interpret it as a president who doesn't fully understand what he's doing, and I suspect the Kremlin interprets it the same way. It's true, the sanctions that Biden proposed before the Russian invasion failed to deter. That's a huge failure of leadership on the part of the United States. But part of the discussion at NATO today was to try and get our European friends in particular to tighten up on their sanctions, and we ran into difficulty with that. We're not completely united in the NATO alliance. Putin can see that disagreement, and it means that in all probability that he will continue his behavior and hope that he can work further splits inside NATO.
If anything, the U.S. seems to be leading from behind, at least compared to the United Kingdom. They've been far tougher, at least on some of the Russian oligarchs and leadership and their children. Sergei Lavrov, widely seen as Vladimir Putin's staunchest ally and henchman, the UK just sanctioned his daughter, who's living a billionaire's life in the UK. Her bank accounts are frozen. There's talk about whether or not Vladimir Putin's kids should be sanctioned as well. Will that change Russian calculus if it's their kids now being threatened and their lifelong financial future threatened?
I think it's open to question. I'm certainly in favor of these sanctions, but I'll just speak for myself. I'm sanctioned by both Russia and China. It hasn't made any difference in my lifestyle, not that I had any assets there to begin with. This has a symbolic value. I think it says to Russian elites generally that they're going to get cut off from access to the West. But, you know, I'm sure they can visit nice beaches in China, too.
You know, this may be the first time I've ever interviewed someone who was actually sanctioned. We will mark this day down. Or at least I knew about it because I've interviewed you before. This from Jillian Turner, my old colleague at Fox News, one of the best national security reporters out there. I know you worked with her as well. The Biden administration is considering allowing Russia to buy and import Iran's excess enriched uranium, the core component in nuclear weapons, under a new deal. State Department's Ned Price to Fox News. I think that's a role we'd be willing to entertain. At the same time we are fighting the Russians, we're trying to make a deal with them about Iran and allowing the country threatening nuclear war to get more enriched uranium. Somehow, I'm having trouble understanding and explaining that. Can you?
No, and I think in Congress, when the administration announces that they've finally been able to reach agreement to get back into this 2015 deal, I think the political reaction is going to be incandescent. The Biden administration has made more concessions than we can count. We don't know all the details yet. The one you're enumerating is unfortunately only part of the relief given to Russia. It looks like we're also going to permit Russia to go ahead and build at least one more nuclear reactor at the Bushehr facility. That probably cost about $10 billion a copy, which would provide money the Russians need. But there are many other things about this effort to get back into the 2015 nuclear deal that are bad for the United States, bad for Israel, bad for our Arab friends, bad for almost everybody except Iran.
Except Russia. The one last thing I want to get to is China. You mentioned them, as did President Biden today. Take a listen.
China understands that its economic future is much more closely tied to the West than it is to Russia.
I got 30 seconds. Is that enough?
No, it's not. Look, we know for a fact that China has Russia's back in this Ukraine conflict. Almost certainly, Chinese financial institutions are allowing Russian banks under sanction to move their money through their channels. China is perfectly willing to buy more oil and natural gas from Russia. These two have an entente, and as China has Russia's back on Ukraine, I think they expect Russia to have China's back on Taiwan. This has been something in the works for a long time. I think President Biden doesn't seem to get that.
Ambassador, these are scary times. We're always glad to have you along to guide us through them. Thank you, sir.
Glad to be with you.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.